Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate everyone making it out here tonight. I think this is a very small, curated group, but with people who are highly interested in this topic. What we're going to be talking about tonight is the growth of direct investments into early stage companies, خاصة بالسعودية, but across the region as a whole. And for those who don't know me, my name is Khalid Terhouni. I'm the managing partner at NUWA Capital. We're a VC firm focused on early stage investing in the GCC, Egypt, and Turkey. I'm joined by a group of highly esteemed panelists from different parts of the ecosystem that are particularly interested in this space. So I think what we'll do is start off by having the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the topic and have a free-flowing conversation around how the market for early stage angel investing, venture capital investing is evolving in the region. So starting.
Hello everyone, I'm Musaab Hakami. As of today, I'm a general partner at VentureSoug, a fintech focused fund on early stages in the MENA region. Pleasure to be here, and thank you, Khaled, for inviting me.
Also former startup founder.
That's a previous slide.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Zuhair. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ZEST Equity, a platform digitizing private market transactions and also enabling direct investments through SPVs and so on.
يا هلا والله مرحبا مساكم الله بالخير جميعا. اخوكم فيصل عبد السلام CEO Core Vision Investment Company, Chairman Purity IT Company. ان شاء الله we hope get approval soon ان شاء الله from CMA to going IPO باذن الله.
So, all right. So I think maybe kicking this off, Zuhair, why don't you tell us a little bit more about, because ZEST Equity is at the core of this kind of direct investment movement, as it were. Maybe tell us a little bit more about what made you want to start this company and what the company does and how this fits in with the rest of the wider ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, the ESPV business, or what's helping the direct investments, was an evolution. The original premise of what ZEST was meant to be was a platform enabling liquidity and secondaries and venture-backed startups. What we ended up doing, my co-founder and I, was building a digital and legal infrastructure to enable this. And as we were looking to do our first deal, we were approached by individuals, including some in this room, one to my right, asking if they could use the infrastructure to run their deals in private. As in, can I use your digital and legal infrastructure to run my own SPV in private? And that's when we realized that this is what the market wanted. And actually, on the back of that, we ran our first 2-3 deals in a matter of few months. And then 2023 came and we executed 50-55 deals, and we're at like $65 million worth of digitized transactions now. So what we're starting to see is that there's a preference for direct investments. There's a preference for young investors to choose, so not to go into the blind pool, but to choose or to double down on underlying assets that they prefer. And they could do so using a platform like ours.
Excellent. Faisal, maybe tell us a little bit more about, you're a very active investor yourself. Tell us a little bit more about what your experience has been investing in early stage companies in the region, what you look at, how do you think about investing, what are your pain points, what do you look for when you're looking at investing in individual startups?
Okay, thank you Khalid. أول شيء Core Vision Investment Company today our focus على early stage. يمكن الفترة الماضية صار الفوكس على ليد جولات استثمارية using ZEST يعني a lot of time. أمانة نحلوا إشكاليات كثيرة في موضوع ال SPV. So actually الأكتيفيتي اللي احنا نسويها we doing 2 activities اللي هي البرايفت equity. We have a lot of traditional business زي ما قلت لكم إنه واحدة من الشركات IPO سون إن شاء الله. الشركة الاستثمارية تمتلكها 65%. So الجانب الآخر الاكتيفيتي الثانية اللي هي قضية الانفستمنت. So our focus على early stage دائما اكبر المعاناه دائما في المراحل الاوليه للشركات اللي في المراحل الاوليه غالبا هو موضوع الكلوزنج راوند. احنا شفنا بوينت او شفنا نقطه فيها مشكله، فيها تحديات كبيره، انه اغلبيه الايرلي ستيج غالبا هم الفند ريزنج، غالبا ما بين تقريبا ال 1.5 الى ال 4 الى ال 5 مليون دولار، which is يعني هذا تكتل انجل انفستر غالبا كلوزنج الديل هذه، ممكن كلوزنج within a week within 2 weeks، افضل من الصناديق. والصناديق طبيعي انها ما تدخل في المراحل الاوليه ما لم ينص الاستراتيجي عندهم انه على الدخول في المراحل الاوليه. That's why our focus to support الانتربرنور، خصوصا لما يكون يعني سوق واعد او حجم سوق واعد، قطاعات معينه مركزين عليها، تركيز في الاول والاخير على البيرسوناليتي او الاشخاص الانتربرنور. الحمد لله في لوت اوف سكسس ستوري صارت الفتره الماضيه، ايذر انه كانت اكزيت، ايذر الفولو اب او الفولو ان اللي نسويها دائما مع الانتربرنور الشركات. اور اكتيفيتي انفست من الايديا ستيج الى ما قبل البريسي، الى ما قبل البري سيريس اي او سيريس اي. افتر ذات جوينج تو الى السكندري، نستخدم البرايفت ايكويتي فند. اكشلي اليوم today كورفيجن we are me and my partner only, so that's why الديسيشن عندنا سريع. I don't need to take الكوماتشنج من الصناديق اللي موجوده هنا. I'm using ZEST a lot of time. This is يعني overall about Corfigen.
وبس عشان نكمل على هذا الموضوع، كيف طبيعة علاقتكم مع كمستثمرين مع الصناديق الاستثمارية؟ بتتعاونوا معهم؟ كيف تشتغلوا معهم بشكل عام؟
طبيعي غالبا الشركات اللي احنا وانفستد فيها في المراحل الاوليه لما تروح مرحله سيريس اي غالبا يكون لنا يد في الموضوع، سيريس اي سيريس بي لما تروح مرحله الاي بي او. توداي اليوم احنا يمكن عندنا 3 شركات احنا ماسكين موضوعها للاي بي او، خصوصا بالاكسبيرينس. عندنا واحده من الشركات ادرجت في السوق الموازي حاليا قيمتها 600 مليون فور ماي براذر. هذه واحده من الشركات احنا اشتغلنا عليها، عندنا الاكسبيرينس في موضوع الاي بي او، ايذر حتى في السوق الرئيسي مش بس فقط في السوق الموازي. اليوم السبورت لما ننتقل الى المراحل السيريس اي اللي غالبا عرف عن الصناديق انهم يدخلون في المراحل هذه، احنا وي سبورت الكمباني. وغالبا لما تكون الشركات جروث ستيج ايزي تو كلوز الراوند، خصوصا لما يكون بري اي بي او الموضوع اتس ايزي تو كلوز الراوند. يعني اليوم عندنا يمكن اكثر من 3 شركات تقريبا تقنيه، واحده بالسعوديه وشركتين قاعدين نحاول انها تكون موجوده هنا تستفيد من الخدمات اللي موجوده. نشتغل مع الصناديق البرايفت، في بعض الصناديق معروفه وفي بعض الصناديق غير معروفه. يمكن حجم المبالغ اللي هم الان يبحثون عنها اكثر تقريبا من 85 مليون دولار، which is هذه رايحه لمرحله ما قبل الاي بي او.
ممتاز. ممكن يعني from the other side مصعب, how do you work with individual investors or angel investors from the early stage through to IPO?
Well, I can wear multiple hats. So
هو أنت كمان on the founder side and then on the investor side.
Yeah. So on the angel investment side, I would say having the track record, alhamdulillah, اللي I built during the past 7 to 8 years, I would say it's easier for me to raise an SPV or a syndicate a transaction for an early stage startups, and I usually focus on that element. The minute the company reaches the opportunity or the stage of Series A, B, C, I try to avoid dealing with any I would say external investors over there, other than a friendly introduction. But I would say ZEST allowed me to, I don't want to say disrupt, but actually disrupt the early stage investments for the VCs. So now we can syndicate, we can deploy faster, we can assess the opportunity from I would say from the idea stage until the Series A. We can invest in a matter of what, a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks maybe. And so far, I personally have done more than 17 SPVs on the platform. 15 were primaries and 2 were secondaries. And I think a lot of retail investors are interested actually in deploying and interested in accessing this asset class. However, they lack the connections, the network. They lack the ability to assess opportunities and filtration. So as a syndicate lead, I would assume I act as a solo IC member, and I pitch the idea to those angels or retail investors and syndicate this couple of millions, I would say, and invest usually in transactions.
So a question, يعني السؤال للجميع بس, is there a risk in making this type of asset class, this type of investing too available for retail investors? Because it is highly risky. It is يعني a difficult environment. فالسؤال يعني to everyone really. بس زهير مسك المايك بسرعة عشان إنه خاف. بس إنه like yeah.
So listen, I think a couple of things. The word retail can mean many things, right? On our platform, the average ticket per active investor is between $75,000 and $125,000. Okay, and so you're not talking about, and we have strict minimums on what we can apply. Now, I think the way that it works in is like you're saying angel investing. Is angel investing risky? Obviously, it's risky.
Yeah.
As long as you have all the bells and whistles there, right? And telling your investors that there is a serious risk that you're investing in an illiquid asset class, I think then that's effectively a measure you have to put in place. For us specifically, and the way we work now, for example, when we move to think about secondaries or other deals and we're getting licensed out of the ADGM, the idea is to get licensed for professional clients only when we push larger secondary deals, because secondary deals is when you need someone sophisticated enough to assess the opportunity and to say that, yes, okay, I'm capable in assessing and I understand the risk at this large scale. Right, so I'm going to pause there.
بتحب تعقب على الحكاية زهير أخ فيصل؟ لا. طب how do you see, because also يعني you have a fund well, I'm a fund full disclosure, ZEST is a portfolio company and we have like a fund manager, we have like a individual investor, we have like a different group here. How do you see the difference between investing in a fund for a high net worth individual versus investing directly, and what's the trade-off between the two? So what do you tell your LPs مثلا versus invest direct versus
well, you need to invest with us, so I can tell you that. But I think most of the ultra high net worth individuals and high net worth individuals, plus I would say semi-sophisticated family offices, usually prefer direct deals, although they don't have the experience of stakeholder management nor managing the situations and ups and downs. However, if you don't have enough experience and exposure, I highly recommend you to go through the fund as an LP. But after that, either you continue doing the LP plus co-investment, or you go directly. But you need to understand that you have a lot of stuff that you need to do other than just looking at pitch decks and deploying funds. And I think you know better than anyone that the hustle of managing a big portfolio, a large portfolio. Unfortunately, most of the ultra high net worth individuals prefer to go directly at this stage, but I started seeing them going through the learning curve, understanding that when life is good and the interest rates are low, anyone can be a good investor. But once they started seeing the 5%, 6%, 7%, everyone started screaming and begging for help from other fund managers or friends.
So when things go bad.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to say the word bad, but yes, when things go bad. But I would say that's the main element. Of course, direct investment, you will get your returns faster and quicker, but you're gonna lose a lot actually. And if you are not a good loser, if you cannot wake up and do it again after you lose a chunk of money, I highly recommend you to become an LP than a direct investor.
Great. Faisal, maybe tell us a bit more about يعني, what excites you when you see an early stage investment. يعني, what do you look for? What when you see a company, what are you assessing for?
I will tell you about my story about الإكزيت اللي صار العام الماضي. العام الماضي كنت يعني I met with my friend. I know him very well. يعني هو كان experience حقته 15 years experience في different sector, either international, semi-government, government, private. I know him very well, good experience. الإشكالية كان راتبه عالي جدا. فمايند سيت الانتربرنور موجود عنده يعني كمايند سيت يعني فعلا لانه كان عنده تجارب فشل سابقه وتجارب نجاح يعني بس كانت على سكيل صغير جدا. فاي ريمبر الستوري ترانسفير تو هيم $50,000 without يعني بدون اي سي ار يعني نوت يت يعني استابلش سي ار. قلت له بعد فتره حتى اذا دار عليها الحول زكها يعني موضوع الزكاه فطول الموضوع 4 شهور لين ما قفل اول جوله استثماريه. حتى اذكر اعطوني نسبه كانت يعني كبيره نزلت يمكن عن 4 أو 5%. يعني ال $50,000 يعني على ستارت اب في المراحل هذه يعني 1% مور ذان انف. لكن الحمد لله اخذت نسبه. فالجوله الاخيره كان كلوزنج راوند. الجوله الاخيره كانت في ليب الماضي $8 مليون. اي ديد فول اكزيت. وكانت يعني واحده من السكسس ستوري. واحده من الاشياء اللي طبعا ما اي كانت ريكومند اني ون الانفستمنت بالطريقه هذه لانها هاي ريسك. وغالبا الانفستمنت دائما في المراحل الاوليه هو اللي يجيب. فلذلك يمكن اخوي مصعب عنده اكسبيرينس كبيره جدا في المراحل الاوليه خصوصا بالبدايات. لكن نتكلم اليوم عن قضيه الانفستمنت في الايرلي ستيج يعني طبيعي انه ما يكون المبلغ كبير. ذاتس واي احنا عندنا التو استراتيجي. لما تكون الشركه جروث ستيج ندخل البرايفت ايكويتي نستثمر $1 مليون الى مليون الى تقريبا الى $3 مليون which is هذه الشركات البري اي بي او which is بالنسبه لنا كثير. خلاص الريسك عدى.
راح الريسك.
يعني الريسك يعني اعتقد انه يعني نسبه كبيره عدى. لكن ما راح اطلع ب 15 ب 20 30 اكس. يعني الستوري الاولى كنت طلعنا تقريبا 41 بلس اكس within تقريبا 18 months. فذاتس واي هي التوزيع او البالانسنج اللي يصير في الانفستمنت ايذر انه كان بالايرلي ستيج او كان بالمراحل الجروث. تنويع الاستثمار هو المطلب. طبعا فور شور اي كانت زي ما قلت في البدايه واعيد اكرر عليها انه اي كانت ريكومند اني ون تو انفست بالطريقه هذه. ما لم يكن انه فعلا يعني هو عارف الشخص معرفه تامه وفي تراست. يعني تراست انه مش تراست على مستوى البيرسونال اكيد هذا موست امبورتنت. لكن تراست على المستوى انه فعلا قادر على اداره الشركه الى ابعاد اخرى.
Excellent. Maybe Zuhair, do you want to talk a little bit about يعني as a platform how you think about pricing of secondaries, especially when they're on that market?
Look, as a okay.
Or how they're priced.
Yeah.
Right?
How they're priced, because we don't offer, right? It's like the platform executes pre-agreed transactions between a buyer and a seller, right? And so usually price is either pre-agreed or we employ a mechanism to allow for price discovery via a Dutch auction. Okay, and a Dutch auction basically allows for the participants to go and say, you bid on a price per share, and then you fill in kind of the order, and then the lowest price basically dictates all the rest before the cutoff point. And that's a mechanism that's also rarely used in our ecosystem because people come to the platform having pre-agreed the price. Okay. So that's the best thing I can tell you. There are price discovery mechanisms, however, they're not used so far. I think as the ecosystem evolves, and they will start being used more and more so.
So would you say like for ZEST, like it's about, and for the users on both sides, the su'al is for everyone, is it the platform is very effective in streamlining the entire end-to-end process, but less so on discovery?
The platform is today, as it's evolved, is meant to instill trust in a transaction process.
In the transaction process.
You are executing a pre-agreed transaction with, between a buyer and a seller or a syndicate lead and their participants. You're ensuring best practice. And actually, sometimes some participants say, wow, it's like you're creating some friction, but because we're enforcing best practice, okay? But yeah. Over time, then we could, with the right licensing, we can offer, and then you think about how do you price that. And I guess, some people have more experience in secondaries than I do, so I'm going to hand over the mic and see what he thinks.
To be honest, I prefer to use ZEST on primaries rather than secondaries. And I think we led the first Series A using an SPV when we invested in Hekba. It was a $5.1 million, so we led the whole round through an SPV or a syndicate that we did using ZEST. And it was a seamless process. It was amazing. And then 4 other VCs followed on. So this will show you, or this shows you the trust
platform.
in the platform, in the process, in the KYC, in the compliance, and the whole supply chain of process and elements through ZEST. So secondaries, I think it will come eventually, but as of today, I see a lot of primaries happening. I see a lot of early stage, pre-seed, seed, pre-A and A, even priced equity rounds happening through the platform, and you can easily co-lead as well through or lead around using ZEST.
And Faisal, this is also your experience, يعني تجربتك is more around the primary مش secondary. It's more about investing early.
اول شيء زستي حلت اشكاليات كبيره امانه، يعني بالمنطقه فقط ناقص شيء واحد. كنت اقول للاخوان موضوع تعريب الموقع، خصوصا كثير من الكواليفايد انفستر اليوم اللي لسه بادي يدخل في المجال. ايش هي اس بي في؟ تقول لي والله هو صندوق مؤسس. طيب اوكي اي نو ان هذه ترجمتها، لكن احيانا تدخل في ديب تفاصيل معينه ما يفهم ليش هو راح هناك، ليش طيب مشتاق للسعوديه، داخل السعوديه عندنا المساهمه المبسطه، تجي تتكلم عن المساهمه المبسطه هذا موضوع ثاني مختلف عن اللي قاعد يصير. فزست اليوم حلت اشكاليات كبيره زي ما تفضل اخوي مصعب على قضيه انه السكندري، واعتقد السكندري هذا عالم ثاني، واتوقع بيكون لها ابعاد جميله جدا. شوف الوش ليست اللي حاطينها جميله جدا، لكن كبرايمري اس فور شور يعني هاف مور ذان اعتقد 5 إلى 6 اس بي في، والايام القادمه ممكن توصل الى 12 13 تقريبا. فسهوله الاستخدام، التيم يعني امانه، حتى مرات احيانا الفاوندر بانفسهم، يعني زهير يكون موجود، حبيبنا ابو طلال كذلك يكون موجود، احمد، الشباب، غاليه الى اخر، كلهم متواجدين، وهذا من الاشياء اللي يسهل عمليه التواصل عكس البلاتفورم الثاني. يعني without mention any name، مع العلم اني انا مستثمر فيها، بس انه يعني امانه حلوا اشكاليات كبيره جدا، سهوله الاستخدام، وفي النهايه هو بالاول والاخير هو شايل عنك هم اشياء كثيره، الليجل، فاينانشال، الامور هذه كلها كامله.
عندك ثقه بالبلاتفورم
بالضبط.
زي ما تفضلت، الشباب موجوده بتتواصل معهم مباشره.
I think it's worth mentioning that before launching Fintech Fund 1 and Fintech Fund 2 in VentureSoug, VentureSoug did over 200 transactions using syndicates and SPVs. And right now we're talking to ZEST to offload everything to them. So you can imagine that even the VCs started actually looking into ZEST as a solution rather than a competition in this field.
Excellent. So يعني ممكن to take one step back and let's think about the overall startup environment بالمنطقة بشكل عام. What's your expectations for the coming 2-3 years؟ علما إنه we've had a little bit of a slowdown آخر كم سنة، يعني uneven. بالسعودية لسه في a lot of like activities, slow down a little bit elsewhere, but as you get to the later stages, there isn't that much capital available. You get to Series B, etc. فأنتوا as يعني investors or also as infrastructure providers to the ecosystem, يعني what's your view as to what's coming in the next 2-3 years? What will the activity look like at the early stage? Is it increasing, decreasing, and what's going to happen as companies get to Series B?
I'll be happy to kick it off. So I think a lot of smart people get hired into I would say the successful startups so far. Sari, Marsool, Zed, Salla, etc. So everyone is actually happy and building their experiences. However, very soon those people are gonna leave their jobs. Especially, I anticipate I would say H2 next year to be a very active early stage period of time. A lot of people are gonna leave their jobs. A lot of companies are gonna start listing or hope to list. So you would see a lot of companies and a lot of senior execs in startups leaving their positions after vesting and starting new businesses. So yes, I agree there is a slowdown. However, the market is gonna pick up again in 12 months, and then inshallah we see another wave. Yani.
Excellent. Zuhair, as somebody who's looking at the ecosystem through your platform, what's your expectations for the next 12-24 months?
It's interesting because maybe also our numbers are a bit skewed because we are also a startup that is also growing. right? And so what we see is an increase in frequency and activity. But maybe a metric is if you look one level deep and you double click, we see an increase in the very early stage pre-seed startups and a frequency there. Okay, so that probably means that there's some activity there as well. But also on the other side, which is your Series A and Series B, we're seeing an uptick there. So, and my personal view is that we're also just getting started in the ecosystem. You've got funds. I mean, what is the ecosystem? 12 years old. We haven't completed our first cycle. 12 years old, and you're one of the first.
I've been doing it 17 years.
Okay, أيوة 17
I don't think the first 10 count. بس آخر 7.
عندك the government's on, around the region, pushing money into this and running an experiment. And so I think there is still activity to happen, and I think long term obviously will benefit. It's a good region to be in. You've got a good catchment area, so you have to be bullish. I have to be bullish, right? Yeah.
بالعكس اشوف الفتره الجايه السوق جميل، خصوصا نيو جنريشن جدا مميزين. الفتره الماضيه شفنا في شركات، شفنا في مخرجات كبيره جدا. يعني لما نقيس على السوق السعودي تحديدا، يعني شفنا الفتره الماضيه اكاديميه ابل، شفنا المخرجات اللي كانت موجوده، على الرغم من انهم غير متخصصين اساسا كتك. وشفنا ستارت اب كثيره طلعت من الاكاديميه وطلعت من اشياء اخرى. طبيعي اكيد دبي كذلك، مصر، الدول العربيه كذلك. صحيح فيه بطء يمكن صار الفتره الماضيه تحديدا، لكن اشوف مع البوش اللي صاير والانفستمنت اللي صايره من هنا ومن هنا، اعتقد ان شاء الله الدنيا بتكون جميله خلال الفتره القادمه. سنتين 3 سنوات القادمه اشوف ان شاء الله في بوتنشل كبير. الفوكس يعني شخصيا انا يمكن الفتره الماضيه كنت مركز على النيو جنريشن، يعني متوسط الاعمار تقريبا 23 25، وتشيز هذول اللي عندهم الريسك العالي، مو جيل وظيفه، خصوصا الجيل خلينا نقول يعني الجيل يعني ما اقدر خليني اتكلم اللي تجاوز ال 35 او تجاوز ال 40، يعني غالبا الرواتب عاليه جدا، وتشيز انه صعب انه يتفرغ البزنس. فذاتس واي النيو جنريشن عندهم الاجيلتي انه يتفرغ البزنس ويريد بزنس، وحتى لو خسر بيرجع مره ثانيه، عنده قدره. وبالعكس هذا لو تقيده بوظيفه ثاني يوم مستقيل. وشفنا في مبادرات يمكن في السعوديه هنا في مبادرات تغطيه الرواتب كذلك. فاعتقد يعني الاستثمار في الجيل هذا هو اعتقد اللي شايف فيه بوتنشال الفتره القادمه بيكون باذن الله.
سوري بس خالد، انت 17 سنه، what do you see؟
انا
لا يعني
today I'm the moderator. انا ما بعرفش. لا انا for me I think يعني I think Musaab brings up a really good point. What's interesting about our region, and I don't know if this is a global thing, is we look at cohorts in companies, like there are kind of cohorts of users. There are cohorts of company formation. So one of the most active cohorts is I think 2019 to 2021 period. 2018 maybe to 2021, that 3-year period, give or take, you had a lot of great companies come out of that. You had Tamara, Tabi, Zid, Sella, Sari, right? So many major companies emerged from that period. And then I think company formation slowed, right? So I'm waiting for the next kind of cohort to open up. And I think as investors, whether fund investors or individual investors, the key is to have diversified like time diversity, meaning you're continuously investing so that when the next cohort opens up, you're in capital, you have capital to deploy. Because it's very easy to over deploy upfront because you get excited about stuff, but then you miss the kind of the golden cohort or the golden vintage, depending on how you think about it. But I think that's exciting. I expect another one to open up, and I think we are starting to see it. I think the second thing that I'm really excited about is we usually have like most of what the large companies that have emerged in the region have tended to be kind of first wave consumer internet, e-commerce, that kind of thing. Then what's coming out now is like derivatives of that. So meaning you had Tabi, Tamara lead the way in consumer credit really for the region, but now you need all this infrastructure underneath it to help support it, so that serve companies like Tamara and Tabi. The other is, and I think you all know, in the public markets, there's been a huge wave of activity, primarily in Saudi, but also across the region as a whole. And we're finally starting to see companies that serve as infrastructure for public markets, so capital markets-based startups. And we're co-invested in one, which I can't name, I'm not sure why the founders are very shy about announcing the deal. But that's a type of opportunity we would never have seen, 2-3 years ago? Not possible, actually. So it's this kind of first wave of companies and this entire kind of macroeconomic opening up is leading to secondary opportunities for founders to build for the way the economy is being reshaped. And that's very exciting. For me, somebody who's been like in this a while, like that's what's so exciting. You're finding founders building for kind of very specific things in our markets that are big problems. So that's the big thing. But I think there's going to be some pain, a little bit of shaking out. Like, naturally, there's a lot of things that shouldn't have been funded maybe in 2020 to 2022. And that's all going to get cleaned up in the same time period over the coming 2 years. ففي two kind of like contravailing forces يعني داخلين ببعض.
Nice.
Good. Thanks. Thanks for putting me on the spot like that. That was my job to put you on the spot. I'm just kind of conscious of time. I think it's worth opening up for some questions from the audience. Always start with Mazen. Always rely on Mazen to ask a difficult question.
Thank you all. This was very eye-opening. This is mainly to Musaab being a prolific angel. What do you attribute the most recent 2 to 3 years seed rounds being quite higher than... I remember a world where a seed round was like $1 million Riyal 5 years ago. Was like, wow. Now we are seeing founders raising significant amounts very early. I've seen seed rounds like $5 million. That's on the higher end, and I know it doesn't represent an average, but like $1 million is the bare bottom of that. What do you attribute to founders raising significant amounts very early on in their journey?
Well, that's a very tricky question, Mazen. But let me try
I'm
to
the
answer
king
that.
of loaded questions.
So let me try to answer that. I think there are two sides. One, a lot of retail investors saw the returns from the announced returns from the previous investments in 2018, 19, 2020. So they started feeling the FOMO, and they started just investing without focusing and looking into the fundamentals. So that's one. The second part, which is, I don't think a lot of people would say out loud, but I'm going to say it now anyway, which is that most of the VCs were sitting on a huge sum of dry powder, and they had to deploy that before the end of the investment period. And for them to be able to raise fund 2 or fund 3 or fund 4, and to be able to do that, you need to agree on any terms that's available in the market. So you started seeing angels and SPVs convincing, I would say, some very prestigious VCs to digest higher valuations and higher ticket size, to be able to get rid of the dry powder that they have, to be able to come back to you again and fundraise from Jeddah. So from my perspective, I think those are the two main points in the market.
I would add one thing. Founders also, I mean, that's definitely happening. The other thing is, I think a lot of it's still, Hada's kind of, in a way, these things work together. The other side is, historically, there isn't that much capital in the region, but suddenly there came to be a lot of capital. So founders with that memory said, I don't know when I'm going to find capital again, so I'm going to take the absolute maximum amount of money I can get. And if the market conditions at this moment mean I can get a good terms, so I'll take $5 million at pre-Series A or $10 million, because I want to keep the cash as much as possible because I don't know when it's coming again. So you get that kind of هذا التخوف, this kind of worry. But it was allowed, that was able to happen because there's a lot of front loading of capital and dry powder at the early stage, particularly like pre-seed to Series A, right?
Just to add, since we're blaming VCs,
أنا blaming the allocators. هم أعطوا كتير فلوس لكتير ناس.
at the time also, I mean, the VC is a game of ownership allocation over time, right? And so you have VCs who learned that game, who said, okay, my ownership target is X. And so you take that, you couple with it a high valuation, you have a high round, and dry powder. So there's your trifecta.
I concur on the VCs doing their fair share, because without fail, almost every VC that we have anchored in the early days that was supposed to do only A and above has gone down to C. And the thing is like, oh, I want to just secure my place at the table. I want to, it's like a scouting, but like, again, it was scarcity of deals that, in the initial, when things on paper are very different than things in real life. So when they went to real life and found that there is not that much deal flow, a lot of them, and I saying without fail, everyone who said, I'm going to just do A and above, did a good chunk of seed transactions as well. So that's very.
I mean, the other thing is what started out as A became like seed, right? Like it became an A round for 10 years pre-2020 or 2019, 2020 was a $5 million round. That was without fail. That's a good A round. Suddenly that became a seed round. So if you set up like your portfolio construction to do
100%.
To do A's, but suddenly your A round is like $20 million, you can't do it anymore. So you have to go early. I mean, anyway, sorry. Other questions? Come back to.
Sorry, for those of you who don't know me, Salam alaikum, I'm Ramana, been in the ecosystem also something like 20 years. 12 years ago, founded one of the first VCs in the region in London at that time because there really weren't startups here to be deploying capital to. And I've come back to the region over the last 7 years and spending a lot more time here. But for Khalid, Musaab and Zuhair in particular, one of the questions that has come up increasingly, and of course is a priority for us as a region, is FDI, right? Bringing in international investors into the ecosystem. So I'd love to know a little bit from yourself, Khalid, and Musaab, from a fund perspective, how much interest you're seeing from international investors joining your fundraise as a fund. And then Zuhair, from your perspective, obviously, how that's showing up on ZEST from an individual investor perspective.
So I think from our side, we're seeing a lot of the kind of large kind of private equity / growth investors really look at the region. I think we've seen a number of high profile deals. I can say in our portfolio, somebody, this was not supposed to be announced, but somebody leaked the news that General Atlantic put a very large ticket in Iowa, one of our portfolio companies. And I think, the likes of General Atlantic or the likes of TPG, for example, or kind of others in the market, they're hunting for deals here, because if you zoom out for a second and look at the Middle East generally and the GCC specifically, I mean, this is one of the last remaining long-term macro growth stories in the world, right? Demographics are positive. Overall, the economies are reasonably healthy, but are all trending in the right direction. And then most importantly, there's this kind of unleashing of entrepreneurial activity and the liberalization of these economies that's just propelling us all forward, right? So if you take a long-term trajectory for the next 10 years, it's only natural for a lot of global firms to start looking at investing here very seriously. And we see it in our portfolio companies, right? And I'm sure Musaab will say the same, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a flying wheel. So the international investors would like to see a path to exit. And for them to see a path of exit, they need the government to help and support on that side. For the government to help and support, they need to see successful startups. So the government is playing a big role here, trying to push the public equity market and later on the DCM debt capital market as well. And for them to be able to do that, they need, I would say, some early startups. Not all of them are superstars, but some of them are average startups, and that's fine. Then we started looking into the public market with the secondary market, NUWA as well. Then TPG alike, General Electric alike are going to come and start investing, SoftBank and everyone, simply because they can see a full mature ecosystem. We're not there yet. Again, the whole ecosystem is a startup. The whole kingdom is a startup. We are still building while we're trying to attract FDI, which is fine. However, I think it's happening in the coming 2 to 3 years. A lot of I know personally of some of the most prestigious private equity and family offices in New York and the US looking into Series A startups in fintech in Saudi. And they're actually more than happy to deploy $30 to $50 million per transaction, given that they've already looked at the strategy, they've looked at the execution, and they're happy to jump in.
And how does that translate into the fund for you in terms of when you're closing out your fund? Have you seen what's the demographics in terms of you? Have you had international investors invested?
As LPs, you mean?
As a VC?
As an LPs
yes,
and the
absolutely,
VC?
As an LP, yes.
I think as of today, in the $100 million fund, we're talking about something between 25 to 30%. But there are other, I would say, reasons behind that. There is the flow of capital from China, India, and other regions into the Middle East and the GCC and maybe Saudi mainly. So that helped a lot. But we're going to capture that opportunity. We're not going to say sorry.
I think for us, it's as powerful. So the number of international investors is dependent on the people who run the deals and their network, right? And so it is a number of between 10 to 20% individual and institution, but that number is also skewed because if you have a Cayman entity, you're considered international. If you have a Canadian passport, you're considered international as well. But funnily enough, I saw more internationals a year ago than I do today. Yeah?
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to probably put some more stats on there on the platform, or maybe more questions around where your domicile is, even if you're fund, so that we can actually collect that data, right?
We have, I think we have enough KYC info.
That you do.
Participants can attest. No, we have that. But yeah, I mean, you don't have international persons coming in looking for opportunities because that's not how it works, right? So it's I don't know if it's a fair representation to say the international participants on the platform are actually those coming in and seeking and looking at the region. It has to be someone pulling them in, running their own deal, right? Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Hi, it's Khalid from Falak Angels. I'm Musaab. And so basically my question is, I mean, in Falak Angels now we've just started using SPVs, as a means of deploying the funds. But there is still this question, I think, of how to exit with the SPV. Do you see a market emerging in the region for the secondary sale of SPVs anytime soon, or do we still need to find SPV secondary markets? I don't know, somewhere like Delaware or places where you can sell out an SPV. I think obviously yes, but also for Musaab because he uses it a lot.
Look, it's interesting. So again, we started the platform thinking about secondaries, probably a bit too early. So we built the infrastructure enabled for secondary transactions. So if you are in an SPV and you want to sell to your friend, it's instant, very quick, very easy. And so do I see this evolving into a real market? 100%, definitely. Takes time, markets maturing, understandings, you have to understand where you are. People are just gaining their footing. Prices, there needs to be understanding of pricing, etc. But yeah, we see people execute secondaries all the time, right? And maybe the volumes are low or the amounts are low, but the frequency is relatively high, So yeah, but I guess it's a question, are secondaries going to become more popular in the region? And the answer has to be yes, because that is key to a more mature ecosystem, right? And when it does, we're going to be there to also grab that opportunity.
I think it's going to be more popular, yes, but it's not going to happen with the retail investors, maybe with more of institutional investors. I know of a couple of funds who started structuring secondary focused funds with the help of the gents here. And I think it will happen, but I don't think syndication would be a main element, or an SPV would be a main element to secondaries. It will be like 10-15% of the total transaction amount, but it's not going to play a big role. Big role will happen through family offices, sophisticated family offices, institution investors, and corporates. Those are the players who are going to do it.
Rakan Tashkandi from CyberMe. My question is a bit different when it comes to ESOP, employee stock options. It seems like an enigma for startups, especially early stage. In your opinion, how do you see ESOPs being liquidated? Is it something that only gets triggered when there's, for example, oversubscription in a startup? Or do you see, for example, investors coming in to take in the place of, let's say, employees that left in a startup so they could take their holding, for example? I mean, what would trigger an ESOP kind of arrangement? And do you see potential of secondary market being some sort of vehicle where employees that exited the startup or left?
I think it's a little bit tricky to do, especially the ESOP. You're adding one more layer of complexity. So you want to do secondary and on ESOPs. So that's why it's mainly going to be focused, again, on institutional investors. I've seen two scenarios. The first one is, one of them was a successful company that decided to buy back shares, and they started with the ESOPs, especially that I would say almost 90-something% of their employees vested their shares. So they wanted to give them some liquidity. So they did share buyback. So that was the first example. The second one is what's happening through one of the VCs that I met actually here in the region. They've come up with a very creative model, which is financing the founders to buy back the shares, and they split the upside with them on a percentage agreed before actually the financing happens. And I think this will help the ESOP a lot. And I know that they're doing, I think, 3 transactions next month. So I think and all of them were ESOP. Okay, as far as I remember. So I think, yes, ESOP will happen on a secondary level, but it has to go through funds, and it has to go through corporates or institutional investors rather than syndicates and retail investors.
There's one tricky thing with ESOP is that if you have, one scenario you mentioned, which is if you have ESOP that's unallocated and the team members leave, you don't actually want to buy that or sell that because you need to keep that to incentivize future management. So where this becomes more interesting, this kind of idea around secondaries with ESOP, is much later stage. When the company is quite mature and you are in theory 1 or 2 or 3 years away from exit, you're not so far away from needing to retain long-term talent to get to that final point of crystallization. That's when, and the companies are quite large, that's when you can start structuring things around either unvested ESOP or acquiring ESOP from departing team members or something like that. But I caution against doing that early, because I think you really need to preserve your ESOP pool from, I would say, seed to post-Series B. Beyond that, you can start doing interesting things.
I think just to add to that, because the way our region, or generally what best practice now for an ESOP plan is exit only, and a lot of this sort of liquidity clauses are at the board's consent. So I think what you'll end up seeing is if a company wants to approve a liquidity program or a tender later stage, then it can. But if an employee just wants to sell to someone, same as in the US, right? I've had long conversations with players in the US about this. It's kind of taboo saying, oh, I want to sell my shares. Yeah. Exactly. So company-sanctioned liquidity programs at the later stage is probably where you may see the most volumes in the long term, where the buyers are institutions, right? So there's some thinking there.
Because I think I've seen numerous startups, they're still in probably even quite before the Series A stage, and you see that their ESOP pool is almost
Exactly,
non-existent.
yeah. And then you get in this tricky area where your ESOP pool is not there. If you're selling your ESOP before you even start, that becomes a real impediment to attract further capital, because you're going to have to recap the ESOP pool or refresh the ESOP pool, and it's a whole story. So I think I'd be very cautious about encouraging people to crystallize ESOP too early, really at the later stage, and as part of a wider liquidity program, as Zuhair said. Any other questions? Do you have any?
Thank you. Mahmoud, earlier where I was discussing with Faisal regarding valuations, and one interesting point we were discussing regarding that there's not enough companies that can do valuations, especially with tech businesses. So where do you see this as like forming new companies in the market, attracting foreign companies to come in and support in this important part of the valuation of for setting up and investing in VCs?
You mean like valuing a business, like
valuing the VCs in different sectors, especially in tech, where you don't have enough companies specialized and can
valuing like the portfolios of VCs. So whether VCs are like marking up their NAVs, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Actually يعني الاشكاليه اللي صايره اليوم بالماركت السعودي تحديدا، الفاينانشال ادفايزر اللي يفهمون في تقييم الشركات التقنيه قليله، وشفنا يمكن رسن الفاينانشال ادفايزر مورغان ستانلي، شفنا جاهز HSBC. اعتقد اللوكال يعني الكل يعني انصدم تقييم رسن مالتيبل 61 اعتقد. فهذه واحده من التحديات. اعتقد هذا فرصه كبيره للانترناشنال الفاينانشال ادفايزر انترناشنال، فرصه كبيره انهم يكونوا موجودين بالسوق السعودي تحديدا لتقييم الشركات التقنيه، لان نو ون اندرستاند الشغله هذه. يمكن انا مريت بالتجربه هذه في 3 شركات طرحت، فانا اعرف كيف الفاينانشال ادفايزر لوكال. انا اتكلم طبعا اتكلم الشركات الكبيره، الشركات الصغيره. اليوم في عمليه التقييم في اشكاليه، وما بالك انها شركات تقنيه وقس عليها امثله كثيره، فهذا جزء كبير في تحدي. طبعا اعتقد المراحل الاوليه في مدارس مختلفه في قضيه تقييم الشركات الناشئه، في اكثر من منصه تسوي الشغله هذه، ولكن فعليا ما في شيء واضح لها يعني.
I think there's an opportunity for يعني كل ما الماركت بتطور، كل ما البروفايدرز بالماركت، كل ما ممكن يكثر البروفايدرز بالماركت منهم تحديدا financial advisors. I think there's a big opportunity coming for a locally focused merchant bank that does advisory, that underwrites IPOs, that does M&A advisory, وبيعمل third party evaluation كمان للvaluations تاعون الشركات. We're not there yet, but it's coming. I'm sure it's coming. Someone will do it. يعني I think there is room to build that. But you need more later stage companies to be able to build that. And I think, but I don't think there's anybody there مختص بهذا.
ان شاء الله soon ان شاء الله we will do it ان شاء الله. هذا اور بلان، انه فعليا في اشكاليه كبيره، في تحديات كبيره في قضيه تقييم الشركات الناشئه، خصوصا الشركات اللي بتروح IPO. في إشكالية كبيرة. يمكن كل المتفائلين في رسن بما أنها محسوبة على التك كمباني أو الستارت اب، كل المتفائلين قيموها تقريبا 900 مليار، كل المتفائلين.
شو تقييمك
تقييم؟ لا أنا كان تقييمي لها كان بين 3.5 بليون إلى 4 بليون ريال، وطلع التقييم almost تقريبا 2.8 بليون ريال. فالمقصد اليوم لها مدارس مختلفة. اللوكل اللي هنا حتى الشركات التقليدية التقنية، يعني أتكلم يعني اليوم كسيستم انتجريتر شركة IT، اليوم تقييم الشركات برضو فيه إشكالية. that's why يعني أنا شايف فيه potential كبير. إن شاء الله soon يعني doing something like financial advisor إن شاء الله will take license إن شاء الله soon to help الشركات اللي going to IPO.
excellent.
يعني حتى في موضوع
شركاتنا بعدين.
أكيد.
Excellent. So I think that more or less wraps it up for today. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to our panelists for all their insights. Thank you very much.